If you're struggling with your dog's animal chasing, you are not alone. As a professional dog trainer and the author of Stop Chasing, I've worked with many very high prey drive dogs, including my own dog, Nira, so I know just how common and how stressful this behavior can be. I recently sat down with Amanda Van Tassel to talk about some of the most important questions about dog prey drive.
What is prey drive and why do dogs chase animals?
My dog killed animals. Like it is so upsetting to watch that it's hard not to fault them for it. I often say, like, you don't need better rewards, you need better training repetitions.
Do you think that they can all be trained without using correction?
Maybe they spotted a squirrel they wanted to chase and they're waving treats in front of the dog's nose, and like that dog is taking off after that squirrel. Like the treat does not matter. And I experienced the same thing. Like I had talked about, I switched from correction-based training to rewards around the time.
So, where should people start on their training journey?
I always say a satisfied dog is a lot easier to train than a restricted one. The real world isn't predictable, but your training should be.
Does success mean when it comes to prey drive training?
This conversation is going to completely change the way that you think about your dog's animal chasing and how to actually get training results. This interview is part of the Perfectly Relaxed Walk Summit, which is a completely free online event where numerous trainers share their best tips on how to have better walks with your dog. Definitely check out the link for that down below. Now let's dive in.
I am here with Stephanie, and Stephanie is a force-free dog trainer and founder of Happy Hounds Dog Training. She helps dog guardians build reliable, real-life skills using practical and reward-based methods. She shares training advice through her blog and very popular YouTube channel, and is the author of Stop Chasing, a step-by-step guide to solving dog prey drive. And that is exactly what we're here talking about today, Stephanie. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so excited for this.
Yeah, this is great. I had you on last year. We had a whole different topic. I can't
Yep.
wait to dive more into prey drive in dogs. So why don't we start off with exactly what is prey drive and why do dogs chase animals?
I think a simple way to explain it is dog prey drive is their instinct to find, chase, and catch prey. I think if your dog is chasing an animal such as like your indoor cat, maybe the term prey could be a little bit upsetting to hear. But I use it intentionally because I think it really helps put into perspective why this instinct exists. So we do need to remember that our dogs descended from wolves. Like the common thought process is that we kind of enticed wolves into our camps with food, and in turn they offered us protection. Over time, we realized dogs could have a lot more utility than that, and we bred them into all sorts of helpers. But I even say, like, even if you have a little chihuahua sitting next to you, it's really helpful to keep in mind there's that little bit of wolf still in them. And wolves, they had to actually find and eat animals to stay alive. It was a survival mechanism. So it is really deeply encoded in your dog. And that's one of the reasons I think it can seem like it's such a hard behavior to change. And depending on which breed you have, they're going to have, different levels of that predatory sequence elevated or turned down, but they all have it in some form.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I think gets talked about a lot, but not explained very often when it comes to prey drive, is the predatory sequence. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what that looks like?
Yeah, I wish I could show you the little visual from my book because I'm personally such a visual learner. But basically, it is the dog is going to find the animal in their environment. They'll usually fixate on it. Depending on the breed, they might stalk towards it, just trying to get like closer with but in a sneaky way before they full blown start chasing it. Again, depending on where your dog falls in that predatory sequence, if they do catch up to the animal, they'll often grab the back of it, which is called the grab bite. They might then kill bite, and if left alone with it, they might even dissect and consume it. It sounds pretty horrifying, and the reason I actually wrote the book, we can talk about that later. But my own dog Nira was incredibly high prey drive, and she would catch and kill animals when she was a puppy. And I have no doubt that if she was left alone with those dead animals, she definitely would have done that whole sequence where she also dissect and consumed, which I'm not going to allow. But I think it's again, a good reminder. Just keep in mind that this is a natural instinct. Like your dog's not being bad when they're doing it, even if to us the behavior is deeply upsetting.
Yeah. And I think that's really key, right? Is it isn't bad behavior. It is
Mhm.
natural behavior, scary for us, and but it is very natural, normal behavior in dogs. So
Yeah.
how does that impact training? That can be a tough thing to overcome.
Yeah. Yeah, because in the moment, like when my dog killed animals, like it is so upsetting to watch that it's hard not to fault them for it. But again, I think we need to keep in mind like the dog isn't being bad; they're doing what they were bred to do, and it goes back to that whole like we invited these wolves into our lives, right? And we have domesticated and bred them into. So my dog, she's a Corgi cattle dog. She's two herding breeds combined. Her literal purpose throughout history was to move livestock. She doesn't have, sheep or cows to move around. I live in a condo in the heart of the city. So that instinct is still within her. It's just it doesn't have that healthy outlet or place to go. So it shows up in unwanted ways, such as with bunnies, squirrels, rodents, or my indoor cat previously. So I just think if we can really keep in mind how much throughout history these prey drive and these behaviors have helped us, whether it's with guarding behaviors, moving livestock, like they've been really, really, really useful to us. In the modern world, prey drive isn't really as desirable, but I don't think we can call it bad when it's something that we asked them and we chose them because they had it. So if you can just kind of keep that in mind and respect and fulfill that instinct, you're going to get a lot better results.
Yeah, I completely agree. As a lover of a Beagle Cocker Spaniel mix, also two hunting breeds. And she did struggle with chasing our cat when she was a young dog. I was very lucky that she doesn't have a very strong prey drive considering she's two
Yeah,
hunting breeds. So it was more of like a chase and then psych, right? She'd get close
yeah,
and then be like, ha ha ha, just fooling. So it was,
yes,
I could tell that there was some innocence behind it and playfulness behind it. So I was very lucky in that case that she wasn't out as a young puppy, killing prey. We have
yeah,
pheasants and rabbits on our property, both wild. And that was something that I worked really hard with was to be calm when she could see the bunnies hopping around in the front yard and the pheasants strutting
yeah.
around. It was, yeah, and it was difficult for an overstimulated young dog.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that because I think, going back to that predatory sequence thing, like all dogs have some aspect of that, but not every dog is going to have the same levels for each part. So for your dog, like the chase, that was great, right? Like even if she had the ability to catch up, might not have finished it. Whereas with my dog, and historically, herding breeds shouldn't have as strong of instinct to actually kill, bite, and then maim, because again, the purpose of them is to move livestock, not to destroy livestock, right? Like, so it's interesting because I think breed accounts for a lot, but then we also have to keep in mind that every dog has their own little spin on the personality trait.
Right. Do you think too that prey drive, the varying levels of prey drive as well, do you think that they can all be trained without using correction?
Yeah, so it's such a heavy topic because I think a lot of people use traits incorrectly and then assume that that means that pre-drive training can't be done without rewards. Part of the reason I wrote my book, and obviously I think I've touched on this so far, is my own dog had probably the highest levels of pre-drive I've seen, and I say that as somebody who has now worked with sight hounds and terriers and all the stereotypical high pre-drive breeds. Like my dog was a complete menace when she was a puppy. I sometimes joke that her first name was Leave It because if anything moved, she wanted to go after it. So I feel like I'll just always say, Leave it, leave it. And I really, really enjoy hiking. I wanted to take her off leash hiking with me. And then also, I had an indoor cat at the time, which she wasn't safe with. So it was one of those situations where something had to be done. Around that time, I personally had switched over from correction-based training to force-free and rewards-based. So it was kind of one of my first really big projects where I wanted to see how to solve this in a different way than my conditioning had led me to. So I can definitely conclusively say that rewards-based training works for prey drive because I have done it with my dog and countless clients since. But I would actually take it even a step farther and say that I think it should be trained with rewards and not corrections. Two main reasons for that is kind of as we talked about, like prey drive has been really beneficial for us, right? So it's unfair to call something that is so natural and helpful to us throughout history bad now just because it doesn't fit the modern lives that we're making our dogs live. But the other reason, and I think is missed a lot, is the potential for fallout if you use corrections. So I've worked with quite a few, typically sight hounds, where they were chasing the indoor cat, showing some signs of even potentially wanting to finish that sequence, which is deeply concerning, obviously, to the guardians. But
Mhm.
one of the things I always tell people is dogs build these associations that we don't intend to cause, right? Like if you think about maybe you had a younger puppy, you took them to the vet the first time, they had a great time. Like they got treats, it was completely fine. Then maybe they got their vaccinations, which was maybe potentially scary or painful. The next time you try to take them to the vet, they've built association with that of fear. So they're a little bit more hesitant to go in. If you repetitively do that and they have a negative experience each time, that association becomes quite strong. So if you're using something like an e-collar to correct your indoor animal for chasing your cat, they can actually build up that association where now that cat that they were previously just chasing based on instinct, that cat is now associated with discomfort or pain or fear, and you can cause genuine aggression towards something that, again, it was just a behavioral instinct. And I think you can make it a much harder problem to solve accidentally.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really great point. So, where should people start on their training journey?
So, in the book, I talk about three things that I think are required. And personally, I find if you miss any of the three, it doesn't work as well. So, those are management, training, and then also replacement. So, management is anything that prevents the behavior. So, again, if your dog does get these opportunities to chase after animals, it's really rewarding for them. Like it feels good. They're acting on a natural instinct. So, if you allow that to be rehearsed a whole bunch, it is going to make it a lot harder for that training of the behavior you want to take hold. So I could give examples like with my dog, she really liked chasing bunnies, squirrels, and depending on the season, there was a bunch of grasshoppers at the off-leash park that she liked to hunt and kill. So for temporarily while we were going through the training, I stopped going to the off-leash park. We just did on-leash walks. With my cat inside, I would close the doors to keep them separated. And again, this isn't meant to be a lifelong thing. It's just until that training can really start to replace those behaviors and give you a little bit of foundational skills that you can use in those real life situations. The training aspect, I usually, so this is getting a little bit long, but I usually break it down into three phases. So the first one is using a leave it cue when your dog spots an animal to ask them to leave it alone. It's not going to work if you haven't taught it strongly before they spot an animal, which I think we could talk about separately. The next part is usually I let them just start watch the animal for a while and just practice staying calm before they get rewarded. And then the third phase that I like to get them to, especially if you want to do anything like off-leash hiking with your dog, is to actually train them to be able to spot an animal. And with you saying nothing, they voluntarily disengage and come back to you for the reward. So it's still like that bunny is still signaling something, but it's actually signaling the return to you for the reward for not chasing it. That phase is when things really get amazing. And then the last aspect, and I think it's the part that most people miss or try to sort of shortchange, and it's not gonna work out very well, is replacement. And that's just meeting those instincts and just recognizing again, this is something your dog has a strong drive to do. And I think if we're asking them to stop chasing animals, we have to fulfill that in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. Replacement outlets, I think, are such an important and crucial piece of the puzzle. Over the years of being a dog trainer and just watching dogs interact with a variety of enrichment, even. One of Mabel's favorite things is shredding of cardboard.
Yeah,
That is her instinct.
yeah,
Um, we had Chinese food last night, and I take the staples out of the bag, and then she gets the bag while we
yes,
get the food. And she was kill shaking that
yeah.
last night. So it's this lovely way that they get a chance to interact with prey, or in this case, a Chinese food bag in a prey-like way,
Yeah.
and meet those needs, right? And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I think with every bit of training, every bit of behavior modification, it all comes back to first meeting our dog's needs.
Yeah.
So having these replacement outlets or enrichment activities, whatever you want to call them, I think
Mhm.
is so, so important.
Yeah, I agree. And I think again, I think of training as sort of what your dog is doing for you, because ultimately they have no issues with their behavior. They are completely fine with having that desire to chase after that bunny, right? Like it is us that want that to change. Whereas I think of, yeah, enrichment, replacement as sort of what you're then doing for them and just recognizing and that they are a dog, they have these instincts and that you want them to be satisfied too. Like I always say, a satisfied dog is a lot easier to train than a restricted one. And basically, like replacement outlets, the way I would say it is just anything that fulfills that need in a way that you're also okay with. So with my dog, I gave the example before of she would catch and kill rodents and probably try to dissect and consume. I'm not okay with that. That's not going. She would be happy. I would not. So alternatives, kind of like you, like one of my dog's favorite things was to take stuffed animals and gut them, right? That dissection. We can talk about it later. I think we're going to talk about like the freebie that I have for people. But one of my dog's ultimate favorite enrichment toys is called the clam, and it has these Velcro fasteners, and you could tuck treats inside. So the dog dissects it, and then there's actually something within that to eat. She absolutely loves that one. And just yeah, if you can really meet your dog's pre-drive instincts. I kind of call it the pre-drive battery, where basically, like, if you have a dog that has not been enriched at all and they spot a bunny or a squirrel, their desire to chase it is going to be so much stronger than a dog that's been satisfied at home with activities that you're okay with.
Yeah, 100%. So what about the people that worry that satisfying those needs will just lead to
Mhm.
that prey drive getting worse? I think that's
Yes.
something that's really, really common is, what happens if they do go and kill that bunny, right?
Yes. So I think it's such a common thought, and I've seen it a few times. Like if I post about my dog playing frisbee or something, right? That she's practicing that chase instinct, and I think there's this term in force retraining, like what gets rewarded gets repeated. And I think a lot of people assume that if you are rewarding or practicing those, fulfilling those prey drive instincts, they're going to get stronger and stronger. But the way I say it to people is like, this isn't a skill such as, teaching your dog to play dead, where we're trying to teach them kind of an unnatural movement and reinforcing that. I think of prey drive almost more like a need like hunger. Like it exists. They are born with it. It does not need to be honed. Your dog has it from the time they existed. So again, it kind of goes back to more of that prey drive battery concept where if you compare it to hunger, right? Like if you are working with somebody who's really, really hungry, you can feed them and satisfy that, and then they're not going to be as distracted by that feeling. So it's prey drive, I think of as the same way is if I let my dog chase after a frisbee and really, really get that out of her system, then she's not going to want to chase after that squirrel that she sees afterwards quite as strongly. I also think people take it a little bit too far and they think, oh, I've offered my dog all of this replacement or enrichment. That should be a substitute for training. And it's not. You still have to teach the desirable behaviors as well, but you're going to have a way easier time doing so with a fulfilled dog.
Very good point. This is still management at the end of the day, right? So it's, yeah,
Yeah.
important
Yeah.
to also do the training and practicing the leave it skills and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I often say, even for Lee, because one of the questions that comes up for me quite a bit is, and I get it, I was completely in that situation of, I've tried using rewards-based training for my dog's prey drive. Like maybe they spotted a squirrel they wanted to chase and they're waving treats in front of the dog's nose, and like that dog is taking off after that squirrel. Like the treat does not matter. And I experienced the same thing. Like I had talked about, I switched from correction-based training to rewards around the time I was working on this with my own dog. And I had to have this moment where I realized I was using rewards completely backwards. And one of the analogies I often give is like if you had a bunch of dirt on your floor and you wanted to vacuum it up, but you held the vacuum upside down, would it clean your floor? No. Like, and you can't fault the vacuum for that when you're using it incorrectly. People tend to use treats in situations almost as like a bribe to get their dog to act a certain way in a situation they are not ready for. And to me, that's like holding that vacuum upside down. And I get it. Like I did it. Treats really are only there as reinforcement for your dog doing a behavior and you wanting to reinforce that they can already actually offer in that moment. And I think keeping that part in mind of, if phase one training we talked about is asking your dog to leave it when they spot an animal. If that is your dog's first time hearing the leave it word, it's not gonna work. Like that's unfortunately that's not how proper training exists. So it really does come down to building those foundational skills, typically at home to start, and then actually getting them to the level where you can start using them in real life. And I think if we can think of it that way, you're going to have a lot more success. So I often say, like, you don't need better rewards, you need better training repetitions. And yeah, just really, really kind of breaking it down in a way that your dog can always be successful.
Yeah, I think that's always so important is setting that dog up for success and
Mhm.
breaking things into small steps. If it's not working, find a way to break it down even smaller. Uh,
Yeah.
Reduce those distractions, bring it back inside or to your driveway, wherever it takes to make sure that those skills are, you're building the foundation of those skills before you're introducing the prey or other
Yes.
distractions. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like I always tell people like if you're working on step one, your dog does it well, and you're trying to get to step two and they're failing, they might need one B, right? Like there might be a middle step in there. And I can't fault people for struggling to do that because if you think about it, like we don't have control when you go on a walk, like I can't predict exactly where a bunny is going to be or if it's going to stand still versus run away, which makes that movement makes it even harder. So just really, really finding ways to train for all of those scenarios in a way that you can control. Like the real world isn't predictable, but your training should be. Is often what I
Yeah.
say.
Really love that phrase.
Think,
Yeah, that's awesome. So
yeah,
what does success mean when it comes to prey drive training?
it's a good question. I think if you asked me this when I first was struggling with my dog, my answer would have been more along the lines of like, I want her to be able to see an animal and not chase it. It all came from what I wanted her to be able to do for me, the desirable behavior in my eyes. I still would say that in terms of the training outcome that I would like, that is what I always aim for. But I think now, just again, because you can technically train that behavior with corrections, but you still have this dog that is deeply unsatisfied inside. I now would say that it is a dog that can spot an animal, choose not to watch it, but without feeling like they're lacking in their life. So they're getting enough replacement and enrichment that they're still satisfied, but they're also acting in a way that makes you happy.
Yeah, I really like that. And
Thank you.
it's thinking about meeting everyone's needs, right? And keeping everyone and everything safe at the end of the day. So, yeah,
Yeah, and I think that is it's just such a good way of saying it because I feel like a lot of the time with dog training, we're like, I dislike this. I want you to act like this. But we sort of forget like the dog's experience in life too. And it really does, I think it really should matter to us that both parties are happy at the end of the day.
yeah, absolutely. I used to say, it's a little bit vice versa, but I used to say that the walk is for the dog, right? And I was
Yeah.
always promoting that. But then I realized, it's realistically, it's for both of us at the end.
That's
So let's try to both enjoy this walk together.
And
And
then it's actually a bonding experience, right? Like I feel like it also really helps us get out of that mentality that it's like we're in competition with our dog or we're in, our dog training is in competition with the environment. Like it just becomes this thing that's actually more of like it's supposed to be a together experience
not
versus
down.
yeah, like one person having a great experience at the expense of the other.
That's
So
right. Yes, exactly. So, Stephanie, any last pieces of advice for anybody watching this today?
I think it goes back to what I've kind of touched on a few times, but I would just say like don't try to outcompete prey drive in the moment. Like train those foundational skills that you can then use successfully in real life. But start your training just much, much earlier than you think. Start it indoors and just then start practicing using those skills out with real animals. And I think when we do that, we find out that rewards-based training works really well.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's such great advice. You've left a couple of presents behind for everybody. So
Yeah.
there's a guide, how to safely satisfy your dog's chasing instincts
Mhm.
so that the training can actually work. Tell us a little bit
Yes.
about that.
Yeah, so that is just an email freebie. If you sign up for it, you'll actually get a couple emails from me. The first one is the PDF that goes over replacement outlets that are my absolute favorites, the ones that I use very often with clients, and sort of the three rules that I follow when it comes to choosing them for each selective dog. Um, and yeah, and then the rest of the email sequence just goes a bit deeper into why pre-drive training also typically breaks down and important skills and things like that to keep in mind.
That's awesome. It's nice to have those guides available, but then to have the follow-up tips that go along with it, I think are just
Yeah.
as valuable, to be honest. And then you've got your book,
Mhm.
Stop Chasing, a step-by-step guide to solving dog prey drive. Tell us a little bit about your book.
Yeah, sorry to say it's about a decade in the making. Just because it is the method that I eventually, through painful trial and error with my own dog when she was younger, came up with for her prey drive. And then I have used it and practiced it with so many clients' dogs successfully. And then at some point, I wanted to see, without any direct involvement from me, could people just follow it at home? So at first it started as a digital guide. I got fantastic feedback from it, and that kind of encouraged me to eventually make it into a full-blown print book. So it just goes over all of the things that I think you need to know to understand your dog's prey drive and then actually modify it in real life. So there's tips in there of, if your dog is highly likely more triggered by a moving animal than one that's just sitting there, how can you rehearse for that? Like, how can we do controlled movement practice and just all these things that make it useful in the real world?
That's amazing. I honestly can't wait to dive into it. We
Yeah.
talked about before we hit
Yeah.
record today that I have a client that this book was made for,
Yeah.
also a bit of a cat chaser, and
Yeah.
movement is a struggle for her. So I'm
Yeah.
excited to learn more from you and hopefully help some more dogs not chase animals.
Yeah. Yeah. And not feel disappointed or sad that they don't get to. I think that's the part I really, really try to emphasize all the time is
Yeah.
just you still want a happy dog, right? Like we just also want to make sure that it's safe for them and for the other animals around them.
Absolutely. That's what I even say about leash walking. Like it's fine to be
Yeah.
excited, right? To want to go on that walk and that
Yeah.
adventure. But let's decrease that enough that nobody's getting pulled down the road. Nobody's getting pulled into traffic. There's no, safety incidents and everybody arrives home happy and healthy.
Yeah, it's interesting because I sort of side tangent here, but on my YouTube channel, one of my most recent videos, I showed like a real walk with my dog, and it was really cool showing it even for me to get to watch back because I don't film with her that often. I usually film with clients' dogs. There was a few moments where there was crows just off the sidewalk hopping around, and just to see like she looked at it, she definitely you can visibly tell that she noticed, and then was like meh and chose not to chase. And it was just a really cool reminder again for myself of just how far she's come because that bird wouldn't have had a good experience if this was 10 years ago. So
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for taking the time to talk to me again this year. I'm so excited to share this talk with everyone.
yeah, thank you so much for having me.